Welcome to the Slow Storyteller. Today's story is at level A2 for elementary learners. Find a comfortable place, relax, and let the words come to you. The woodcutter's house stood at the edge of a great dark forest. The trees were very tall. Their branches reached up like long fingers into the gray sky. In winter, the wind came through the walls of the little house. It made a low, sad sound, like someone crying far away. The woodcutter's name was Johann. He had two children. His son was called Hansel, and his daughter was called Gretel. Their mother was dead. Johann had a new wife now. She was a thin woman with sharp eyes and a sharp voice. She did not love the children. She only loved herself. That winter was the hardest winter in many years. There was very little food. The bread was almost gone. The soup was only water and a few old vegetables. At night, Hansel and Gretel went to bed with empty stomachs. They listened to the wind and felt the cold. One night, Hansel could not sleep. He heard his stepmother talking to his father in the next room. Her voice was low, but Hansel listened carefully. "We have 4 mouths to feed," she said, "and food for only 2. If we keep the children, we will all die. We must take them into the forest and leave them there." "No," said Johann. His voice was tired and sad. "They are my children. I cannot do that." "Then we will all starve," said the stepmother. Her voice was hard and cold. There was a long silence. Then Johann spoke again. "All right," he said. His voice was very quiet. "All right." Hansel heard his father's words and felt something cold in his chest. Not the cold of winter. Something different. Something worse. He got up very slowly and put on his shoes. He opened the door without a sound. Outside, the night was clear and cold. The moon was bright. The stones on the path near the house shone like pieces of silver in the moonlight. Hansel filled his pockets with those small white stones. He picked up as many as he could. Then he went back inside and got into bed. "Gretel," he whispered, "are you awake?" "Yes," she said. Her voice was small and frightened. "Don't be afraid," said Hansel. "I have a plan." The next morning, the stepmother woke them early. "Get up," she said. "We are going into the forest today. Your father needs help with the wood." She gave them each a very small piece of bread. That was all. Nothing else. As they walked into the forest, Hansel walked slowly. He kept his hand in his pocket. Every few steps, he dropped one small white stone on the path behind him. The stones were bright in the early morning light. Gretel watched him. She understood, and she said nothing. They walked deep into the forest. The trees grew tall and close together. The light became gray and dim. The air smelled of wet earth and old leaves. After a long time, Johann stopped near a large tree. "Wait here," said the stepmother. "Your father and I will go and cut wood. We will come back for you." She lit a small fire for them. "Stay by the fire," she said. "Keep warm." Then she and Johann walked away between the trees and disappeared. Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire. The fire crackled softly. They ate their small pieces of bread very slowly. They listened to the sounds of the forest, the wind in the branches, the call of a bird far away, the crack of a twig somewhere in the darkness beyond the trees. Hours passed. The fire got smaller. The sky through the branches grew dark. "They are not coming back," said Gretel. Her voice shook. "What do we do?" "We wait for the moon," said Hansel. They waited. When the moon came up, it was full and bright. Its light fell through the branches and lit up the path. And on the path, one by one, the small white stones shone like silver. "Follow me," said Hansel. They walked all through the night, following the stones. One stone, then the next, then the next. The forest was dark around them. Strange sounds came from between the trees. But the stones were always there, always bright, always showing them the way. Just before morning, they arrived at their house. Their father was standing at the door. When he saw them, he gave a great cry and ran to them. He put his arms around both children and held them tight. "I am so happy," he said. His voice broke. "I am so sorry." The stepmother said nothing, but her eyes were sharp and angry. For a few weeks, things were a little better. Johann found some work. They had bread again, and sometimes soup with a piece of meat in it. Hansel and Gretel ate slowly and carefully because they knew the food might not last. But winter went on and on. The snow came back. The work stopped. The food ran out again. And one night, Hansel heard his stepmother's voice again through the wall. "This time," she said, "we take them further, much further, so far that they cannot find their way back." "Please," said Johann, "please don't ask me to do this again." "We have no choice," said the stepmother. Her voice was flat and cold, like ice on a stone. Hansel got up quietly. He went to the door and tried to open it. But this time, the door was locked. He went back to his bed and lay still in the dark. He thought for a long time. "Hansel?" Gretel whispered. "Did you get stones?" "No," he said. "The door is locked, but don't be afraid. I will think of something." In the morning, the stepmother gave them each a piece of bread. It was very small, even smaller than before. They walked into the forest again. This time, they walked much further. The trees were bigger and older here. Their roots came up out of the dark earth like the hands of giants. The path disappeared. There was no path at all. Hansel walked slowly. He broke off small pieces of his bread and dropped them on the ground. He dropped one piece, then waited, then dropped another. Gretel watched him, but said nothing. After many hours, Johann stopped. He lit a fire. He could not look at his children's faces. "Wait here," he said. "We will come back." He walked away. He did not look back. This time, the children knew the truth. They sat by the fire and waited for the moon. Hansel felt sure of his plan. When the moon came up and the light fell through the branches, he looked for his breadcrumbs. But there were none. He looked again. He walked a few steps one way, then the other. Nothing. The breadcrumbs were gone. The birds of the forest had eaten every single one. Gretel put her hands over her face. She started to cry. "Don't cry," said Hansel, but his own voice was not steady. "We will find the way. Come on." They walked. They walked all through the night, but every path looked the same. Every tree looked like the last tree. The forest went on and on. They were completely lost. In the morning, a white bird appeared. It was small and very white, and it sat on a branch just above their heads. It looked at them. Then it flew forward. It stopped on another branch and looked at them again. "It wants us to follow," said Gretel. They followed the bird. They walked for a long time. The ground became softer under their feet. There was a sweet smell in the air, something warm and wonderful that did not belong in a dark forest. Hansel stopped walking and lifted his nose. "Do you smell that?" he said. "Yes," said Gretel. "It smells like cake." They walked faster. The white bird disappeared. And then, between the trees, they saw it. A small house. But not like any house they had ever seen. The walls were made of bread. Brown, soft, thick bread. The roof was covered with flat pieces of cake, brown and golden. The windows were made of clear white sugar, and they caught the light and sparkled. Around the door, there were rows of white icing and small round sweets in red and yellow and green. The two children stood and stared. Their stomachs were completely empty. The smell was extraordinary. "We should not," said Gretel, but Hansel was already moving forward. Hansel reached up and broke off a piece of the roof. The cake was soft and sweet. He put it in his mouth and closed his eyes. Gretel broke off a piece of the window. The sugar was cold and smooth and wonderful on her tongue. They ate in silence. They ate quickly. They were so hungry. Then a voice came from inside the house. It was an old voice, soft and slow, like water moving over stones. Nibble, nibble, little mouse. Who is eating at my house? Hansel and Gretel stopped eating. They looked at each other. Then Hansel called back in a high voice, the wind, the heavenly child. There was a moment of silence. Then the door opened. An old woman came out. She was very old and very small. She walked with a stick. Her back was bent. Her nose was long and her chin was long, and they almost met in the middle of her face. She smiled at the children. Her smile was wide and warm. But her eyes were red. Not just a little red, truly red, like fire, like blood. Hansel stepped back. Gretel took his hand. "Oh, my dear little ones," said the old woman. Her voice was sweet. "Look at you. So small, so thin, so tired. Come inside. Come and rest. I have food, real food, and warm beds. Come, come." Her hand was on Gretel's back now, and somehow they were moving toward the door, and then they were inside. The inside of the house was small and warm. There was a fire in the fireplace. On the table there were pancakes and honey and apples and nuts and 2 cups of warm milk. The smell was extraordinary. The children sat down and ate. They could not stop. The food was delicious. When they finished, the old woman showed them 2 small white beds in the corner. The beds had clean white sheets, soft and smooth. Hansel and Gretel lay down. In minutes, they were asleep. Outside, the forest was dark. The wind moved through the branches. Somewhere in the trees, a bird called once, and then was quiet. The next morning, Hansel woke up when he heard the door. Before he could move or speak, the old woman's hands were on him. Her fingers were strong for an old woman. Very strong. She pulled him out of the bed and out of the house. There was a small building next to the house, a cage, really, made of iron bars. She pushed Hansel inside and closed the door with a heavy lock. Hansel held the iron bars. "Let me out," he said. "Let me out." The old woman looked at him. Her red eyes were calm. Her smile was still there. "You are very thin," she said. "That is a problem. I like to eat children, but they must be fat. I will feed you well. You will grow fat. Then I will eat you." She was not whispering. She said the words clearly, as if she was talking about the weather. Gretel came running out of the house. When she saw Hansel in the cage, she stopped and gave a cry. "Quiet," said the old woman. Her voice was sharp now. "You will cook for me and clean for me. If you make trouble, your brother goes in the cooking pot today, thin or not." Gretel looked at Hansel. Hansel looked at Gretel. Neither of them spoke. "Good," said the old woman. She went back inside, and so began a very long time for the 2 children. Every day, the old woman brought Hansel the best food, meat and bread and sweet things. She wanted him to grow fat. Every morning, she came to the cage and said, "Stick out your finger, boy. Let me feel how fat you are." But Hansel was clever. He did not stick out his finger. He stuck out a small, thin bone, the bone of a chicken that Gretel secretly passed to him through the bars. The old woman's eyes were weak. She could not see well. She felt the bone and frowned. "Still thin," she said every morning. "Still thin. How is this possible? I feed you so well." Weeks passed. Gretel cooked and cleaned. She carried water and chopped wood. She cried at night when the old woman was asleep. But during the day, she worked and watched and thought. One morning, the old woman woke up in a different mood. She was angry and impatient. "Enough," she said. "I am tired of waiting. Fat or thin, today the boy will be cooked, and today I will also make bread." She lit a fire in the great iron oven. The oven was big. Big enough, Gretel saw with horror, for a person. The old woman put wood inside and the fire grew hot. very hot. The heat came out of the oven and Gretel could feel it on her face and arms from across the room. "Now then," said the old woman. She turned to Gretel. "Come here, girl. Climb up and look in the oven. Tell me if the fire is hot enough." Gretel looked at the oven. She looked at the old woman. She understood. This was not about the fire. The old woman wanted to push her inside. "I don't know how," said Gretel. She kept her voice quiet and innocent. "I don't know how to check an oven. How do you look inside?" The old woman made an impatient sound. "Stupid child. Like this." She walked to the oven and bent forward, putting her head near the open door. Gretel moved very fast. She put both hands on the old woman's back and pushed hard. The old woman fell forward into the oven. Gretel grabbed the heavy iron door and pulled it shut. She pushed the latch across. The latch was very hot and it burned her hands, but she held it fast. From inside the oven, there was a sound. Then there was no sound. Gretel stood in the kitchen. Her hands hurt. The room was very hot. She could hear her own heart beating. She stood there for a moment. Then she ran to the cage. "Hansel," she said. "Hansel, come out. She's gone. She's dead. It's over." She broke the lock with a heavy stone. It took 4 hard blows. The door swung open. Hansel jumped out and grabbed his sister. They held each other for a long time without speaking. Hansel was shaking. Gretel was shaking. They stood like that until the shaking stopped. "How?" said Hansel. He looked at his sister's red, burned hands. "She tried to trick me," said Gretel, "so I tricked her first." Hansel took his sister's hands carefully and looked at them. "Does it hurt?" "Yes," said Gretel, "but it's all right." They went back inside the house. In the back room, behind a locked door that was not very hard to break open, they found the old woman's treasure. There were wooden boxes full of pearls, white and pink and gray. There were cloth bags full of jewels, green and red and blue, catching the light like tiny fires. There was gold. There was more than they could believe. "She kept the children's shoes," said Hansel quietly. In the corner of the room, there was a pile of small shoes. Old shoes. Children's shoes. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Gretel opened her apron and they began to fill it with pearls and jewels. Hansel filled his pockets. They took as much as they could carry. They left the house and walked into the forest. The morning was cold and the trees were dark, but there was light between the branches. They walked together, side by side, in the direction they thought was home. They walked for a long time. The forest seemed to go on forever. The trees looked the same in every direction, tall and dark and old. The ground was covered in dry leaves that made a soft sound under their feet. Sometimes a bird called above them. Sometimes the wind moved the high branches with a sound like distant water. "Do you know where we are going?" said Gretel. "More or less," said Hansel. He did not sound completely sure. They walked on. After a while, they came to a wide lake. The water was still and dark, and it crossed their path from one side to the other. There was no bridge and no stones to cross on. The water looked deep and cold. They stood at the edge of the lake. Hansel looked left. Gretel looked right. Then a white duck appeared on the water. It swam toward them slowly, without any hurry. "Please, dear duck," said Gretel. "Can you carry us across the water?" The duck turned and swam to her. Gretel got on its back. She was not heavy, and the duck was strong. It carried her across to the other side. Then it came back for Hansel. One at a time, the duck carried them across the still dark water. Hansel could feel the cold of the lake coming up through the duck's white feathers. When he reached the other side and stepped onto the earth, he turned to look back. The duck was already gone. On the other side of the lake, the forest began to look different. The trees were a little smaller. The path was easier. After another hour of walking, the trees became familiar. "I know this tree," said Hansel. He put his hand on a large oak with a broken branch. I know this place. They walked faster, and then they saw it. The small house at the edge of the forest. The walls were thin, the garden was empty and brown, but smoke was coming from the chimney. Their father was home. They ran. Johann heard the sound of running feet and came to the door. When he saw his children, he made a sound that was not a word. It was just a sound, a raw, broken sound that came from somewhere deep in his chest. He ran to them and fell to his knees on the path and put his arms around them both. He held them and did not let go. Every day, he said. I looked for you every day. I went into the forest every morning. I called your names. I thought. He stopped. He could not finish. We're here, said Gretel. We're here now. Hansel looked around the small house. Where is she? He said. He meant their stepmother. Johann sat back and looked at the ground. She died, he said. Not long after that day. I don't know why. She just got sick one night, and by morning she was gone. The house has been very quiet since then. Very empty. He said these words without sadness, not with happiness either, just with a quiet kind of truth. It is not empty now, said Gretel. Johann looked up at her. His eyes were wet. No, he said, it is not. Then Hansel opened his pockets, and Gretel lifted her apron. The pearls and jewels fell onto the kitchen table, white and pink and gray and green and red and blue, rolling softly across the old wood. The gold coins caught the light from the fire and threw it back in warm, golden points across the ceiling. Johann stared. He touched a pearl. He touched a jewel. He looked at his children. Where did you get these? We will tell you everything, said Hansel. But first, can we have something to eat? We have not eaten since yesterday. Johann laughed. It was not a big laugh. It was a small, surprised, grateful sound. But it was real. Yes, he said. Sit down. I will make bread. He put more wood on the fire. He got flour and water and salt. His hands moved quickly and carefully, doing the thing he had done 1,000 times before. Outside, the wind moved through the dark trees at the edge of the forest. Inside, the fire crackled and the kitchen grew warm and the smell of bread began to fill the small house. The three of them sat together for a long time that night. The children told their father everything. The white bird, the house made of bread and cake, the cage, the old woman's red eyes, the oven. Johann listened without speaking. Sometimes he closed his eyes. Sometimes he reached out and touched their hands. When they finished, he was quiet for a long time. I was a coward, he said at last. You were hungry, said Hansel, and afraid. That is not enough reason, said Johann. No, said Gretel, it is not. But we are here, and we are together, and we have enough now for a long, long time. Outside, the forest was dark and quiet. The tall trees stood in their rows, keeping their secrets. Somewhere among the trees, there was a small house made of bread and cake, its oven cold now, its treasure gone, its door hanging open in the wind. But in the woodcutter's house at the edge of the forest, the fire was burning, the bread was warm, and all three of them were home. That's the end of today's story. But before we go, what are the key words we learned today? Let's review the 10 most useful words from this story. 1. Abandoned, left alone and not looked after. 2. Cage, a closed space with bars, used to hold a person or animal. 3. Starving, suffering badly because there is no food. 4. Latch, a small metal bar used to keep a door shut. 5. Pearl, a small round white jewel found inside a shell. 6. Nibble, to eat something in very small bites. 7. Treasure, a collection of valuable things like gold and jewels. 8. Innocent, appearing not guilty or not knowing something bad. 9. Impatient, not wanting to wait, feeling annoyed at delay. 10. Coward, a person who is not brave when bravery is needed. Thank you for listening to the Slow Storyteller. Slow stories, real English, every week. If today's story helped you, please subscribe so you don't miss next week's. Until then, keep listening, keep learning,